and I didn't have the chance to meet you before. Okay, so webinar is a live stream right now.
Okay, so I will
let's start the webinar. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I will do the introduction first. Your introduction, and you introduce the panelists.
Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Thank you for joining us today. Start. Yeah. Okay, we are live.
Excellent.
So, welcome everybody. Welcome all the SIGRADI members. I'm glad you are joining us today. I see Paula, the chair, connecting right now. Hello, Paula. Okay.
Everyone, I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to be here, right?
No, you're a SIGRADI member. You're supposed to be here. I mean, that is the whole point. I mean, getting together.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Nice to meet you. Some of you, nice to see you. Have a great panel session. I'll leave it to it, Marcelo.
Okay. Okay, so let's start. I'm going to introduce Pedro first. I mean, it's an honor introducing a good friend like Pedro. So Pedro, who is going to be the moderator today for our panel, is currently assistant professor at Universidad de Chile in Santiago. But he has a long story with university because he was the director of the School of Architecture, Design, and Geography at the same university. And he's also past president of SIGRADI, of the Ibero-American Society of Digital Graphics. Pedro obtained his PhD in design cognition from the Georgia Institute of Technology, where we have the chance to, be classmates in some of the courses. And Pedro also received the Montagu Award in recognition for his contribution to the community, to Georgia Tech for, until now, right? Currently, his research focuses on understanding the role of declarative knowledge plays in formulating early architectural problems, and also on exploring how BIM and Internet of Things contribute to measure the performance in architecture. So Pedro, welcome, and I believe that you are going to introduce our panelists today.
Yes, thank you so much for that introduction, Marcelo. I wasn't really expecting that, so it was a bit of a surprise. So thank you everyone, and welcome to this second panel of SIGRADI, Dialogues between Neuroarchitecture and Artificial Intelligence toward the future of architectural design. So in this panel, we're going to discuss current trends in neuroscience and artificial intelligence that might inform architectural design processes. But we're going to try to do that looking the example of some of the guests that we have here, since Professor Del Campo and since Katarina Richardson. Also, we're going to see what is the industry doing. That was the reason to invite Dr. Mehdi Nubarj. He works on Autodesk, and he also going to share with us some of the things that they are doing in Autodesk research in this area. And of course, we will see what is happening in Latin America, since SIGRADI is the Latin American Association for Design, Architecture, and CAD. So we invited Professor Gabriella Sartori. She is the current director of the Institute for Neuroscience and Architecture of Brazil. She will be joining us in a few minutes, but we can start ahead. So first of all, I'm going to have the honor of invite Professor Matthias Del Campo. He's an associated professor of architecture at Taubman College in the University of Michigan. He's also a registered architect, designer, and educator. His work is very well known for the people of SIGRADI and the civil organizations. He has presented in and has been member as a board in the board of the director of Acadia and the IJAC, the International Journal of Architectural Computing. His work in SPAN is in permanent collection and different museums, and also in several private collections. And he is co-founder of SPAN with Sandra Menninger. So in his work, he's going to show us some of the current trends and projects that they have been working. So first we will see the work of Professor Del Campo. So.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Matthias Del Campo. I'm an associate professor of architecture.
Also the co-founder of Untitled Laboratory for Haptic Guidance at College, which is a collaboration with Mission Robotics, Neuroscience.
Sorry, I think that we have a problem with this. So I'm going to start again the video.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Matthias Del Campo.
Are
I'm an
you
associate
watching the
professor of
video?
architecture at Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning, University of Michigan. And together with Sandra Menninger, I run the architecture practice SPAN. I'm also the co-founder of the ARI Lab, the Laboratory for Architecture and Artificial Intelligence at Taubman College, which is a collaboration between Michigan Robotics, Computer Science, and Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning. I'm bringing you today the short lecture, Neural Architecture, a new paradigm, and hope to discuss with you after this some of the aspects that I mentioned in this lecture. It all started in Vienna in 1998. Sitting in the court of the Baroque ensemble housing the OFI, the Austrian Institute of Artificial Intelligence, SPAN debated the implementation of AI in architecture with OFI director Robert Trappel and PhD student Arthur Flexer. While sipping on a good cup of coffee, which traditionally, of course, fires the synapses, the discussion gravitated around the simulation of neurons and how to use them to identify things. Out of this early conversation, a concept emerged over time: neural architecture. Neural architecture is the field of architecture that is primarily preoccupied with interrogating the emergent field of artificial neural networks as a method of designing architecture. INNs can be described in short as a sequence of mathematical algorithms that are capable of registering latent correlations in a set of data. In this lecture, I present an attempt to utilize deep learning and machine learning to capture the salient features of existing architecture in order to interrogate this data for their underlying architectural qualities. What is meant by underlying architectural qualities? The rational explanation would include aspects such as spatial layout, sectional distribution of volumes, the dialogue with its environment, the volumetric balance, the material qualities of the design, the structural properties, and so on and so forth. All of these are things that can be explored with the help of machine learning processes. However, the ambition of the project in this lecture maintains that architecture is more than just an assemblage of rational properties. This might explain the obsession with neural art, which represents an excellent mirror of our contemporary age, particularly regarding our shared agency with quasi-intelligent machines and the observation of the world. Can architecture do the same? Can neural networks help interrogate the latent layers within the geological deposits of the history of architecture, and then assemble those found features into hitherto unseen designs? What is the context of which this idea emerged? Artificial intelligence is deeply embedded in our everyday life. Neural networks help diagnose medical cases, make decisions on bank loans, decide parole cases, read your bank checks, filter job applications, drive cars, fly drones, detect fraud, translate text online, and recommend to you which book to read next. They are part of our households in the form of quasi-intelligent thermostats and security systems, help finding our way in our cars by using adaptive maps, and are close to the human body in the shape of smartphones and watches to estimate your health status. They recognize your face and the way you type and help you photograph like a pro. Among many other things, the data generated by all these activities aid in perfecting the training of all these algorithms. In other words, AI is everywhere. And these are only the examples that we currently perceive as humans. The massive underbelly of artificial neural networks providing intelligent services, managing the copious amounts of data on servers, organizing the routes data takes, controlling traffic lights, managing shipping, subway schedules, and many other mundane tasks elude our field of vision. They operate, as Lev Menovich put it in his book AI Aesthetics, and I quote, in the gray everyday of the digital society, end of quote. Fast forward 20 years after this meeting with the OFI directors and Arthur Flexer, and in 2018, SPAN got the following question. Can you design a robot garden? This question by Jesse Grisel, the director of Michigan Robotics, marks a milestone in SPAN's efforts to design architecture with artificial intelligence. The collaboration with the robotics and computer science departments of the University of Michigan paved the way to a series of design methods based on various neural networks. After these first modest efforts, some crucial questions emerged about the being, becoming, and reality of this architecture design methodology. Questions about the agency, authorship, the sensibility in a post-human design ecology. What is the architect's role in a context where the sole authorship is not in the human anymore, but when agency is shared? Can neural networks provoke a novel sensibility in architecture? These questions helped in the critical interrogation of designs embedded in a world increasingly entangled with the various aspects of AI. They provided the bedrock for the ontology of neural architecture. This presentation focuses on one issue that needs discussion in this new ecology of design: defamiliarization. Defamiliarization, or ostranenie, is an alluring area of consideration regarding the discussion of architecture designed with the aid of neural networks. The term itself was coined in 1917. The Russian formalist Viktor Shklovsky described an artistic technique that provoked the audience with imagery depicting everyday things in unfamiliar or strange ways. The goal was to provide the audience with the opportunity to gain new perspectives and observe the world through a different lens. Through techniques that introduce abstraction into the aesthetics of realism, Shklovsky suggested that art extends attention. Thus, slowing down and amplifying assiduity in itself is an aesthetic experience. More recently, Aaron Hertzman, reflecting on some arguments made by the artist Robert Pepperell, identified visual indeterminacy as a crucial feature in what he calls GAN art. These features include a certain amount of realism and coherence in combination with distortions beyond mutation, withstanding a complete interpretation as a consistent form. Thus, the image allows for continuous examination, resulting in extended attention. In this respect, defamiliarization and estrangement offer the opportunity to observe the world differently than it's commonly understood or perceived, as also pointed out by Michael Young previously. According to Lawrence Crawford, Jacques Derrida operates in a similar vein with his thoughts on difference. The aspects of defamiliarization offer a reason why humans respond almost viscerally to images produced by neural networks. The ability of these visuals to be strange but familiar enough for us to recognize them as discernible objects. Francis Bacon comes to mind, but in contrast to the visceral artistic will of Bacon, Klingemann's imagery, like for example, this one you see here, which is the Bachasson, is all generated by a generative adversarial network operating on the fringes of curve fitting. Klingemann's artworks devour large data sets of historical paintings, primarily portraits, and crunches the data through powerful GPUs. They produce latent walks through these collections of historic artworks, resulting in provocative pieces such as the one you see here. This is precisely where SPAN chimes in. Intentionally mining the history of architecture and its vast repository of imagery, the oeuvre seeks to tease strange visuals from neural networks and GANs to inspire architecture design, providing surprising, intense, wonderfully weird imagery, fully embedded in a novel aesthetic. In the following 3 abbreviated examples of the design work that emerged from their preoccupations with neural networks. First, the robot garden. Artificial neural networks are ubiquitous across disciplines due to their high performance in modeling the real world to execute complex tasks in the wild. The project Robot Garden contains a computational design approach that uses the learned internal representations of deep vision neural networks to invoke stylistic edits in both 2D objects and 3D objects, respectively images and meshes. Positioned along the concave western facade of the new Ford Robotics building, the Robot Garden serves as a testing ground for mobile robots of various families. The garden's design is entirely based on a GAN and neural style transfer, using AI in all design processes. This method allowed to design a synthetic ecology oscillating between the natural and the artificial. The resulting digital model served as the template for the construction, and it continues to serve the purposes of simulating and preparing the test of robots in the garden. The garden itself is executed in natural materials, providing the different terrains such as grass, gravel, stone, sand, water, and also topographical features, inclinations, and pits to emulate rugged terrain. The provided site was analyzed using a set of satellite images as a basis. The given shape of the area was cut out of the satellite images to create a set of pictures geared towards 2D to 3D neural mesh rendering. In an attempt to have a neural network dream or hallucinate architectural features on the site, it was trained using an extensive library of images of columns, stairs, and fountains. Surprisingly, the resulting images represent a novel view of these archaic architectural features. The hybrid nature of the resulting meshes do not show the features in total clarity, but are rather the hallucinogenic dream of a machine trying to see features in the landscape. And in the lower row here of images, you see one example of a test of hallucinating fountains onto the site. I'm particularly also interested in results like this because these are the ones that provoke most ideas about what it is that machines understand of architecture and how it basically informs our designs. I would love to build it exactly like this. At some point we will. The 24 High School presents a completely different approach to using neural networks in design. The motivation to explore attention generative adversarial networks, attentional GANs, as a design technique in architecture can be found in the desire to interrogate an alternative design methodology that does not rely on images as a starting point for architecture design, but language. Traditionally, architecture design relies on visual language to initiate a design process, whether it is a napkin sketch or a quick doodle in a 3D modeling environment. Attentional GANs explores the information space present in programmatic needs expressed in written form and transform them into a visual output. This visual output can be further processed into 3-dimensional models that transport lingual information into fully developed architectural entities. The key results of this research are demonstrated in a proof of concept project, which is what you see here, the competition entry for the 24 High School in Shenzhen, China. This award-winning project demonstrated the ability of attentional GAN to serve as a successful design methodology for a reasonably complex architecture program. In the area of neuroarchitecture, this technique allows interrogating shape through language, an alternative design method that creates its own unique sensibility. The third project that I want to show in this presentation is the House Alpha. Exploring machine learning methods allows us to interrogate large data sets of architectural archetypes based solely on 3D models instead of 2-dimensional representations. This proposition uses a flexible dataset structure called a graph. It is utilizing the generalization of the standard CNN called Graph Convolutional Neural Networks, GCNN, to model and perform the entirety of the design process by only applying 3D models and information. The central claim of this idea is to provide a possible solution for the question, how can a neural network interrogate the inherent sensibility of a specific designer? This idea relies on the possibility to model a designer's sensibility as a high-dimensional function that can be learned to produce novel design solutions. The backbone of this design technique is the GCNN, which are capable of modeling both the perception and creation of architectural objects. The key to this technique is to train a GCNN to capture the aesthetic sensibilities of a specific designer based on neuroaesthetic labels, such as primary visual features, coloration, geometric features, scale, semantic properties, and so on, but also aesthetic quality and functional quality. You can read actually more about this in detail in the paper 3D Graph Convolutional Neural Networks, which was presented at the Akita Conference 2020. The proposed approach can be broken down into several steps. First, generating labels and a large data set, right? A data set of OBJ meshes. And they are from specific architectural classes, houses, and columns. So we refer to this data set as the sensibility data set. The next step is to train a GCNN on this data set to learn a mapping function between the Cartesian coordinate space of 3D models to our defined label space of sensibility features. The final step, placing the trained GCNN into an optimization framework that takes in a user-specified 3D model as an input and then deforms the vertices of this model to optimize the shape for a user-specific style, aesthetic, or functionality label. I would like to add that this was a description provided by Alexandra Carlson, who is one of the main members of the ARIL lab and crucial in understanding and creating the pipelines of design that we present here. In conclusion, what I want to say is a quote from my partner Sandra Manninger from a recent lecture. So what does it mean if we are being assisted by tools that learn, when we move from using expert systems to learning systems, when we live with robots and machines, when we extend our senses through an added perception of the world? Can these tools extend our creative potentials, and will they aid us in representing scientific and mathematical concepts of space? Who will be the curator or advocate of data? The data we acquire and the data we produce? And who will be the participants in the design protocols that we are about to generate? And with this, I would like to thank you very much for the generous invitation to participate today. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation, and I hope I could provoke one or the other question with my presentation. Thank you very much.
So thank you for sharing your presentation with us, Dr. Del Campo. Now we are going to see the presentation of Dr. Mehdi Nubarj from Autodesk. Mehdi is a research lead at Autodesk Research. He is passionate about bringing artificial intelligence assisted technology to the hands of the Autodesk world. With his several years of experience as a structural engineer and construction manager, he leads a research team focusing on the applications of AI and ML in the future of design and construction. He holds a PhD in building construction and a master's in computer science from the Georgia Institute of Technology. So now I'm going to share with you Mehdi's work.
Hello, and welcome to this presentation. My name is Matthias Del Campo, and I'm excited to share with you one of our recent research projects called Partner with AI in Design. Before I talk about this project, I'd like to talk a little bit about Autodesk Research. Autodesk Research is an R&D organization inside Autodesk. We typically look 3 to 5 years ahead of the company, and we create new prototypes or user interfaces and test them to see which one works or which one doesn't work. Some of these research components will then be migrated into the incubation zone when our product teams try them and put them in beta so that it becomes accessible for our users. And based on the feedback we get from our users and from our customers, then we will incorporate those into our products. This is how Autodesk Research works with the rest of the company. I'd like to start this presentation by talking a little bit about the spectrum of autonomy. And I like to use the self-driving car example. On the left side, as you can see, there is no automation. And what it means is that the driver is taking the full control. And on the right side is full automation where the machine is having the control. Sometimes as drivers, we want to have full control. Maybe you have a sports car and you want to enjoy the experience of driving. But sometimes we don't want to have any control at all. Maybe you get stuck in a traffic jam and you want the machine to take over so that maybe you can read a book. But somewhere in between is the partial automation. This is where you and the machine are working together. I use this example because I see a similar thing between this and the design. Sometimes in the design, we want to have full control. Maybe you get awarded for the best design in the world, and you want to have the full control of how you want to deliver that. But sometimes maybe you're designing a bathroom that you have designed a million times before. So you want the machine to take over and do that for you. But somewhere in between is a collaboration zone. And you and the machine want to work together. And this is what I'll be talking about today. So I'm excited to share with you our recent research project with Obayashi, a leading design and construction company in Japan. This is Suji-san, the general manager of design at Obayashi. He was very upset about the way that we design buildings, especially at the conceptual design phase. The process at that step is simple. Client wants to decide whether they want to buy a land or not. So they go to Obayashi and ask, can you do a feasibility study for us? What they do is they create a volumetric study based on the zoning requirements and the client requirements. And then they create 2D layouts and the planning of the project. And in the end, they decide whether it's economically feasible or not. But the process is not that simple. Oftentimes, it requires a lot of back and forth between the client and Obayashi. And their question was two things. One, how might we use AI to build trust with our clients? And the second one was, how can we reduce this process from 10 weeks to 10 days? This is the current design process. Typically, the client and Obayashi go into a meeting for 3 hours so that the Obayashi team members can capture all the requirements. Once they have all the requirements, they go back to their office and come up with a lot of design solutions. In the end, they will propose 1 to 3 design solutions to the client to get further feedback, and the process repeats. The office process typically takes between 2 to 3 weeks. In the proposed workflow, we said, what if AI can help to bring all of those into client's office? What it means is that the client and Obayashi are working together with the assistance of an AI agent or AI-assisted design agent to come up with different solutions right there at that moment. In a way, they're collaborating to find whether this design is going to work or not. And once Obayashi has the client's feedback, then they go back to the office and then they can complete the work. So we developed two AI agents, one for the volumetric study and the other one for the layout design. So the first AI agent uses a lot of data from the past project that Obayashi shared with us and takes in some of the requirements that you see on the left side of the screen, together with the adjacency and connectivity requirements that architects can define to create the building volume or building mass. So in this case, what you see on the screen right now is that the architects creates an adjacency diagram of all the spaces that exist and they want to design. And we use this to create the solution. These are some of the solutions that are generated using this AI agent. As you can see, it creates a lot of different solutions when you press the generate button, and it shows some information about these designs. You can keep creating these solutions until you're happy, and then you can send that to the second AI agent. The second AI agent takes in that 3D building volume, and as you can see, you can go to different floors, and once you go into the floor that you want to design, then what you can do is you can use this sketching tool on the right panel to define your space. This is like an office space or conference room or library, and you can have any geometry or any shape that you want. We have some sketching mechanism that you can use to create these geometries and also create doors. Once defined, then you can define the zoning requirements that you have and assign these spaces into the zones. The other thing that I want to mention is that you can define how many rooms do you need. For instance, you want 10 conference rooms or 5 phone rooms, and you can define all of those in this interface. Once everything is defined, then you go to the second interface. So in this screen, you will define design principles or the rules that you have for placing this geometry or these units inside this zone or this space. Just for demonstration purposes, we define my room in the previous screen, and now you can say that place my room or my room should be placed at the center. And once you define these, then you hit submit, and you will see that in a second that this is actually being placed at the center of the screen, or the design. Next, you can define all different rules that you have or design principles that you have. For instance, internal meeting room should be placed away from entrance, or external meeting room should be placed close to entrance. So the algorithm, the AI agent takes in all of these rules and come up with the design. And good thing about it is that you can reuse these rules in your next projects, or you can collect the organizational design principles that you have, or a team level design principles that you have, or you can even use them to onboard the new designers in your team. So once everything is defined, then you hit run, and you will see that this agent is placing these geometries or spaces in here. And because our clients, Obayashi, needed 3 options, so we only provide 3 options here. After defining these options, you can go into the one that you like and start modifying the space. So you can rotate, zoom. When you move things around, it will rerun the rules based on the rule set that you define, and will rearrange things for you. If you don't like things to be rearranged, you can just lock them. You see them in gray, and it will move other units inside the space. You can rotate the units. You can move them, you can scale them, and you're in charge. Again, AI here is just to help you do your design faster and come up with design solutions in a faster way. So if I can add one thing here is that you see there are some of the units that are in place because you define the number of units that you want. And there are some units that are not being placed yet or can't be placed in this scenario. Why did we do this? Is because when the client tells Obayashi that, hey, can you add five more conference rooms? They can just add those in here and run it, and they can come up with the answers immediately. And this is how AI is enabling Obayashi to do their work faster. And this is how AI enabled them to collaborate and work with the client or co-design the space with the client. Previously, they had to go back to the office, spend 1 week or 2 weeks to come up with the designs and come back and give the answer. But now they can work together to come up with those answers. So again, the idea behind the project was how can we use past data, some of these design intents and knowledge that exist inside architect's head, and combine that with the novel interfaces that then we can bring those into client's office. And this way, Obayashi and clients can co-design together. So this way, once everything is settled and all the requirements are captured, they can go back to the office and do their work. This is not to replace what they've been doing in the office, but it's more to expedite that and get the client buy-in faster. This is how they can build trust with their client. And this is how they can reduce the time from 10 weeks, hopefully to 10 days. There are a lot of work that needs to be done for us to get to that point. We also did a user study with professional architects, and these are some of the feedback that we received. The 4-week-long process can happen in a minute. Being free from small details helps me to focus on a bigger picture and propose distinct design concepts. I felt like working with a logical teammate who is good at getting some different ideas. So let's bring it back to the early discussion that we had at the beginning of this presentation. Sometimes we want no automation, and sometimes we want full automation. But sometimes there's a space for the collaboration between AI and the designer. And AI can do that by eliminating tedious tasks and being responsive to a designer's decision. This project was just one step towards this goal. And I'm hoping that we can take the next steps together. Let's connect and collaborate and work together to push this industry forward. I look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neubarch, for sending us that presentation. We're going to continue now with the presentation of Katarina Richard-Lund. I hope that I said somewhat well. So Katarina is an architectural designer, researcher, and first-year doctoral student at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. Her research found out the intersection of design, psychology, and neuroscience aims to promote well-being through our environment. But by translating methods of traditional behavioral therapy, her research seeks to demonstrate how human, machine, and spatial interaction can be leveraged via AI algorithms to propose more seamless and intuitive solutions to address mental health. As part of this work, she explored how neurological and physiological cues can give insight into one's behavior and in turn support cognitive processes through the lens of materiality, computational design, affective computing, and social robotics. Alongside her doctoral studies at Harvard, Katarina is a research assistant with the Material Processes and System Group at the GSD, as well as a member of the Iceberg Lab and the Wyss Institute for Biological Spirit Engineering. Katarina holds a Master in Design Technology from Harvard and a Bachelor of Architecture from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, with a minor in Sustainability Environment. She has worked at leading architecture firms with Soneta, Aru, Iwamoto, Scott, and most recently, Jerry Partners, where she worked as a project designer. So we will see now Katarina's presentation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Katrina Richter-Lunn, and I'm a doctoral student at the Harvard Graduate School of Design in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I would like to present to you today a brief overview of my research. In terms of my formal education, I was trained as an architect and worked in the field for some years. However, as you will quickly see, I have always had a broader ambition of the discipline, and I'm continuously expanding my expertise in areas such as cognitive psychology, technology, and science, all with the fundamental goal in improving mental well-being at the level of the individual as well as the collective. In order to illustrate this ambition, I will briefly walk you through a few works which embody these ideals, starting with architecture and the environment. Early in my undergraduate work, I became fascinated with the potential for traditional psychological treatments to be paralleled with architecture design. This meant researching methods such as exposure therapy, systematic desensitization, and classical conditioning, and using such methodology to guide elements such as program, material quality, and spatial design. Focusing at first primarily on phobias often triggered by our environment, such as claustrophobia and acrophobia, I proceeded to lead individuals through a series of spaces which would prompt the fear to then immediately contrast that experience with a soothing environment. Being frustrated by the speculative essence of many of the design projects, I would look to translate these similar ideas into furniture and a series of body-centric experiments. It was then, however, when I came to Harvard for my master's degree in technology that I started to explore the world of artificial intelligence and machine learning. These new tools opened up a whole new world for me, not only around gathering and interpreting data, but also about how to translate physiological and neurological states through visualizations and music to create experiences which would foster greater mental awareness and personalized experiences. This work led to further explorations around voice modulation through neurological feedback to intuitively adjust the prosody in your voice. This project in particular looks at how we might be able to alter the centric modulation of voice in response to our current emotional state. At the same time as I was exploring AI and ML, I was also introduced to social robotics. Having worked in digital fabrication in the past, I was familiar with a series of these tools, but I'd never envisioned them being used in a dialogue between humans and materials. This led to a series of work collaborating with artists and dancers in producing human-robot duets. And then further expanded on this when I combined my previous knowledge around translating neurological and physiological cues through artificial intelligence to now include the collaboration of social robots. This project, named Translations, looked at creating a performative piece between a human and a robot, in which the robot would mirror the movements of the dancer with adjustments to its speed, rotation, and orientation based on the performer's most dominant EEG frequency. This now leads me to my work around material science. Having previously done some work in the field of materials, and in particular biomaterials, I was eager to further explore how we could give intelligence to materials to in turn produce a cognitive effect. This led to a collaborative project between architects, engineers, and scientists named DOSE. While looking to address the growing prevalence of poor sleep and embrace the material qualities of hydrogels, we developed a sleep mask which would be tuned to your sleep rhythms based on personal physiological metrics and activate an embedded heater to release a specific scent throughout the night. And lastly, this leads me to end with my most recent work, which in many ways is an accumulation of everything I've learned around translating physiological signals to sensorial interventions. This work seeks to demonstrate how human, machine, and sensorial interactions can be leveraged via effective computing to propose more seamless, accessible, and amiable solutions for addressing mental health. This research aims to sit at the intersection of three domains of research: psychophysiology and embodied cognition, sensory environments and design, and effective computing and human-machine interaction. I think it froze. Yeah.
Yep. And our host is gone.
We lost Pedro.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Hello, I think we lost Pedro somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very interesting presentations. We have a question from the audience. Let me see if actually it's for you, Matthias. It's Raquel. I would like to ask Matthias Del Campo about the aestheticization in neural networks, artificial intelligence architecture being fed by image. Can the machine and its product become vain? How to incorporate other agendas in the neural network?
I think I'll have to unpack a little bit what is meant by vain here, but the very first thing I would like to say is that I would like to thank my colleagues for the amazing presentations that we just saw. They're super inspiring, really great. Mehdi, this was very exciting. Katarina, I think there was something missing at the end, but it was really impressive. So thank you so much. And also thank you, of course, to Sigradi for the invitation to talk today. I think this is great to be here in this panel. After this, the question about aestheticization in neural networks is rather one that is not so easy to unpack. And honestly, it's a question. First and foremost, neural networks don't have an aesthetics, right? I mean, they don't have an idea what aesthetics actually means because they don't understand the semantic information that is inherent in any form of aesthetics. So when we talk about aesthetics with neural networks, it's our own interpretation as humans in reading the results that come out from the neural network as an image, right? So we are interpreting the aesthetics. Neural networks don't produce aesthetics. They only are based on information that exists and they move pixels around in weird ways. And those images sometimes provoke us as humans to be inspired or impressed or allow me, for example, as Matthias Del Campo, to interpret this as an aesthetic move. So in this case, it's rather me proposing that this is an interesting aesthetic, but not the machine necessarily proposing this. Yeah. Does that make sense to somebody? Or do I need to expand a bit more? So if at all, it's us becoming obsolete and vain, but not the machines probably.
Okay. First, I want to apologize. I have a problem with the connection. So I'm going to share again Katarina's video since where we were. Okay. Sorry about that.
It's okay. But let's follow up, Matthias, because we already start that conversation. At least in my experience, what I could add is, yeah, the machines are agnostic. They're just a product of the process, but there is some other methods that can evaluate the results. I mean, you can do some subjective survey, if you like, if you want to evaluate aesthetics. You can run some performance analysis, or you can run some basic measurements. There is many things that you can do as a post-process, because those processes generate a lot of information, but it's not the final product is not coming entirely from there. And the other thing is the interpretation of that. At least my experience is, I don't know if you agree, is we designers are very opportunistic. If we see this sort of brainstorming catalog of potential options, that can trigger another idea, right? And that
That's
has
absolutely
value by itself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I can also say something about aesthetic evaluation, which is interesting. We did an experiment last year, which I briefly showed in the presentation with the 3D models that I generated like a couple of hundred 3D models, and we tried to train a neural network where it's able to understand the features, the specific features of my designs, and replicate those in a model, right? And to do so, I had to label, of course, this data set of models, specifically saying which ones I think are aesthetically pleasing and which ones are not aesthetically pleasing. So we actually trained the neural network to understand my own personal subjective idea of aesthetics, right? Or yeah. But this is, of course, a very very personal, very subjective way to train a neural network. It's nothing that would do like a more general expression. This year, we're actually going beyond that, and we're trying to train a neural network to understand when it sees a 3D model of a Baroque column, that it's a Baroque column. But this also means more labeling, more semantic information, etc., etc. So I think that everything that you were asking for, Marcelo, it's possible to achieve those things, but it's possible when we have enough data and enough labeled data in order to make a machine understand what it's supposed to look for. Yeah. I don't think on its own, neural networks are very, I mean, here's the thing. Data-starved neural networks are also interesting, by the way, not only the ones that have a lot of data, because the data-starved ones are the ones that create weird stuff. And I'm interested in the weird stuff, like things that happen that are random and strange and different. Yeah. And this happens when there is misunderstandings of the data or misinterpretations.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, Pedro, please continue. We still have some presentation.
Okay.
Thank you, Katrina, for your patience. We will get there.
So are we there with the video, Marcelo?
Yeah, I think we, yeah.
Okay.
Effective computing and human-machine interaction. In order to suggest a possible methodology that explores our sensory perception, I first looked at each of the senses in isolation and the range of cognitive impact each of these senses hold on mood and emotion. This led to the design of 4 prosthetics, which investigate a different combination of sensory experiences, which respond to specific physiological signals. Each of these pieces follow the same closed-loop system. Starting with the human, a collection of their raw physiological signals are collected. This data is then analyzed and assessed to be linked with a certain emotional state. The interpretation then actuates a specific desired sensorial output, which in return influences the human through their experience of that stimulus. The first piece explores both haptic and auditory sensory stimulus and sits intimately on your wrist. This piece looks specifically at interpreting patterns of electrodermal activity and heart rate variability to recognize signs of stress and anxiety, to in turn pneumatically actuate silicon pockets facing the interior of the wrist. These air pockets seek to mimic slow inhales and exhales, both auditorily and haptically, to soothe and bring up embodied awareness of one's cognitive state. The second piece looks at haptic guidance, However, this time with no auditory stimulus and in the form of soft vibrations rather than pressure. The haptic chair attachment detects heightened and low levels of electrodermal activity, signaling an individual's level of emotional arousal in conjunction with motion gathered from an accelerometer. Observed in parallel, this data can illustrate correlations between prolonged periods of low movement and decreased focus and restlessness. In response, a series of 20 vibration motors lining the fins of the piece actuate when signals suggest either a state of restlessness and agitation or drowsiness and decreased focus. The desk attachment looks solely at olfaction and the power of scent diffusion for focus and relaxation. Similarly to the chair, this piece looks to measure the edge conditions of emotional arousal, which in this context would suggest either decreased attention and sleepiness or increase in stress. Devised of a multitude of layers, the piece consists of a 3D printed rib structure which wraps around the desk. Underneath the structure lies 100% cotton embroidered with 40 gauge nichrome wire, two discrete paths to represent two separate heating systems. The paths directly correlate to the openings in the 3D structure, which act as chambers to house the specific scent to be activated. Depending on the physiological signals received, a certain heating path will be deployed, resulting in the activation of one of the two scents. Lastly, the light attachment focuses its capability on tempering the quality of the light which the bulb emits, to in turn cater the emission of brightness based on the needs of the individual. With a number of precedent work illustrating the effect of light brightness on one's mood and alertness, this piece seeks to very simply mimic a dimmer by leveraging material properties and heating actuation. Embedded with 28 gauge nichrome wire and a bilayer material of PET and aluminum, the piece houses any typical LED light bulb. Due to the difference in expansion rate between the PET and aluminum, when heated, a certain curling occurs, resulting in greater permeability of light. All these pieces were then tested and evaluated through an initial study looking at their impact on one's nervous system. So by now, I think you might have gotten a good idea of the underlying driving force in my work. We can see the field of effective computing growing extensively in research around improving software design, but have yet to see the benefits of empathetic systems fully infiltrate into disciplines such as product design, material engineering, and architecture. I believe the built environment is indisputably essential in integrating these systems seamlessly into the world. And I hope that the projects I have exhibited today begin to illustrate the potential for technology and design to engage in the pursuit for accessible therapeutics, and recognize mental health as a growing crisis which can and really should be addressed by our discipline. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Katarina, for sharing your work with us. Now I'm going to move towards the work and role of Gabriella Sartori as co-founder of the Brazilian Academy of Neuroscience and Architecture. And she is certified in neuroscience and architecture, design and urbanism from the New School. She's an architect and urban planner and also graduated in social communication. She has postgraduate studies in commercial architecture, and for many years she has developed a set of designs for televisions, event theaters, and a way to follow her purpose of inspiring people. However, her career path changes, and the purpose that now inspired her still remains with the personal pursuit of neuroscience, understanding human behaviors, and consciousness. Today, she is the head of the Sartori Design Office Studio at Sao Paulo, with a very human and individualized focus on corporate and residential projects. Also, she is co-founder of Neuroarch Academy, the Brazilian Academy of Neuroscience and Architecture, in partnership with architect Priscilla Benke. This Neuroarch Academy aims to empower professionals, disseminate knowledge, integrate diverse areas into a systematic view of space and behavior. So this is the presentation of Gabriella Sartori.
Hello, I'm Gabi Sartori, an architect from Brazil, and I'm really happy to be part of the SIGRAD event, and I would like to thank Pedro for the invitation to having me here. So I'm going to start to share my screen to talk a little bit about the work that me and my partner Priscilla Benke we've been developing on the topic of neuroscience for architecture here in Brazil. So since 2019, we started the Brazilian Academy of Neuroscience and Architecture, and with the special goal of training professionals to disseminate the knowledge and to develop some studies integrating multiple areas in a systemic view of space, behavior, well-being, through projects, courses, lecture, trainings, and events. Here it's a little bit about what I'm going to talk about some actions that we've been doing in our academy, but the really beginning of everything, it was in 2019 in our first conference on the topic of neuroscience for architecture here in Brazil. So it was a breakthrough event since we got with us some professionals from other areas, from healthcare areas, from neuroscience, from psychology, from biology, and it was a truly breakthrough in the projectile area, especially for architects and designers. Here is a little bit about myself. I am an architect. Through my career, I got some challenges and started to have some questions about what I was doing. I didn't have the purpose anymore to do what I was always passionate about to do. So that's when I started to look for some other content besides architecture. And I got into the self-awareness content, neuroscience, psychology, spirituality, and I got really passionate about all those topics, but I didn't have the knowledge to get all them together. That's when I founded Neuroscience for Architecture, and I changed everything in my career. So today, I'm together with Priscilla Benke, my partner. We are the founders of the Academy of Neuroscience for Architecture here in Brazil, but also we are members from ACE, which is a worldwide group that brings together all the professionals that are disseminating this knowledge in our world. I attended the New School course for Neuroscience and Architecture in 2019, and today I'm specializing into the field of the child development. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about. So here's a little bit about the history of our academy. Yes, we started in 2019, but all our search was some years before that. So in 2016, we started in the conference of AMFA. We started to get to know a lot of the content that were being disseminated in the field, especially the content that was disseminated from ANFA. So since 2016, we were studying this topic, we were getting to know some about it, but we started to question how should we bring this topic into our country, because for us it was a truly breakthrough, and we knew that this knowledge have the capacity to change lives, to change professionals, to change especially projects. So in 2019, the Academy started, and then 2020 and 2021, we did a lot of actions to disseminate this knowledge in our country. We do believe in pioneering spirit, in multidisciplinarity, in that content, and also in connections. What are our challenges? And when I say challenges, I'm talking about the Brazilian challenges. We are a big country with cultural diversity. Brazil is a developing country that still does not value science, so there is a little investment on this field. We have different levels in professional training between architects and designers. We do have also investment difficulty for training abroad. We also have challenges with foreign languages, and we know that with the topic of neuroscience for architecture, language is a bridge. So we also have some confusion about what is in fact NIEF-A and how we got to apply it. And I think the most important one is that the most of the Brazilian architecture office are not into the research area, and especially not into the artificial intelligence, because we know that all of this, we have to have investment on that costs money, that is expensive, that makes us have in our offices some other areas from multidisciplinary professionals. So this is a big thing. So when we are talking about neuroscience for architecture here in Brazil, and we know that we have all these challenges to go through, how can we still apply this knowledge? How can we put that into practice? So that's what me and Priscilla, we were always questioning about. And we started to do in our academy some actions to get all this topic into practice, instead of using artificial intelligence, instead of using research areas that do cost a lot of money and do need to have a lot of professionals involved. So in our actions, we do have continued training course. We have our conference that happens each year. We had in 2019, 2020, and 2021. We started this year the first laboratory into the topic. We support study groups that are volunteer, that are happening in our country. And we do have also a membership, a digital content platform. I'm going to pass really fast on those topics. Here are some pictures from our conferences, 2019, 2020, and 2021. A little bit about our lab that is started this year, and I hope to come together with you in another year to talk a little bit about that again, and some volunteer actions with some volunteer study groups. We also did financial support for social actions that were happening during the COVID-19 here in Brazil. So our platform of content, today we have plus than 70 hours of content on neuroscience for architecture on this platform. So we are really engaged on disseminate this knowledge, because we think that the real key to change our perspective with our professional is to get the knowledge, is to assimilate the knowledge. And in our continued training course, we have a methodology, an aural methodology that we work through with our students, and they go through initial models, intermediate models, and advanced models. I'm not going to explain all of that because we do not have time for that. But what we saw with this course going on, that a lot of transformations with our students into their projects were really amazing. So this year we launched an online book that we call that it's a near book that you can scan over here and get your free copy. It's a bilingual book, and it's the examples of the projects that our students did in our course. Here are also some testimonials that we got from our students talking about how transformative this knowledge were to them. And here is also a survey result that we got from our student to rank our course about their expectations, about the methodology, about the content, the innovative content, and also about the features. Okay, with all those actions that we did in our country, we already have some learned lessons. In only 2 years, we already got to know what are the things that we have to improve and the things that maybe we should not go look through. So on these 6 learned lessons, I would point that the main one is that the architects and designers, they want to put that knowledge into practice. And to put that into practice is not only to do research or to work with technology or to work with some other professionals that will help me with my research, because especially here we are talking about architects that have their own offices, and sometimes they are only employees. So our reality here in Brazil is that most of the architecture offices are really small. They do not have how to, they are not able, not yet, to put into their offices an area directly to research or into technology or to artificial intelligence. So looking into that, we thought that how can we get this knowledge that is so transformative and help them put that into practice and put that into their daily basis routine. So after that, we started to develop some tools that could help the architects to improve their way of doing projects. So our first tool that we launched this year was the EAPA tool, the Self-Perception Environmental Scale. And that tool helps the architect to get to know the perspective of their client. So this tool will help the architects to perceive if their client is most aware of light, of sound, of color, and that will give them some important information for the crucial points for the project, the things that they have to solve, and the things that they have to just take it out of the project. So it's a real practical tool, and we were really happy even to present that tool in the last TANFA conference as a poster. Another tool that we launched this year, that we launched in the conference that happened in this October, is the EAMI tool, that is the memory environmental tool. That the simple thing is to get the memory of your client and use that information to your project. Put that into solutions for your project. And here we are talking about happy memories, because we do want to do some happy environment, especially in the phase that we are facing right now in the world with the pandemic. So here are some results that we had, and here are the groups presenting their work to their clients. I'm just going to share again my screen with the sound so you were able to get the music on. It was a beautiful workshop. It was really transformative. It was emotional. It got into the architects, into the designers, and into the clients' new memories and new environmental memories. It was awesome. Here are some feedbacks that we got from this workshop. I'm not going to read it through because I'm out of my time, but you can read by your own. And my final message: I truly believe in the power that environments can provide from projects that are developed with awareness and responsibility. What does that mean? I do believe that only the knowledge is already capable of doing a transformative environment, an environment that can help us humans be healthier, have better relationships, and have a better and healthier life. So my final message is we do have to start within ourselves. First, we have to get the knowledge and make it be some transformative inside us. Because since we are different, since we go through a breakthrough from our old self, we are able to start to look for our projects in a new way and in a more empathic way, in a more human way. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate that you got with me through the end of this presentation. We are still an academy under construction. Please come and take part of this with us. Bye-bye.
Okay, and last but not least, I'm going to show you part of my own research, and then we will answer some questions that we have here in the panel. Hi, good afternoon. This is Pedro Sosa from the Department of Architecture at the Universidad de Chile. Today, I'm going to talk about how we capture and identify architects' declarative and procedural domain knowledge in our research. Let me start by saying that architectural design is an open-ended problem. And this question, this issue has been around for quite some time, since the late 60s or early 70s. People have been wondering what is the procedure for organizing the design activity. Herbert Simon, Whittle and Weber are among the scholars that have tried to tackle these questions, and that of course have gave us a major legacy of the work regarding this matter. In my research, I tried to look at the cognitive mechanism and the content of the stock of knowledge that we use to understand what kind of mental representations and mental contents allows design processes to emerge. I take a framework from cognitive neuroscience and current knowledge regarding how knowledge representations are encoded and retrieved from long-term memory. We know that there are two major branches, declarative memory or explicit memory and implicit memory. And in the implicit branch, if you want, we have the procedural knowledge, which is the skills that we develop, how to ride a bike, how to draw a circle. On the other side is the declarative knowledge, which allow us to capture and code and evoke word knowledge, object knowledge, language knowledge. When we think who was Franklin Wright, that is declarative knowledge, of course. But also when we as architects think about restrooms, and toilet and sink, that is also declarative knowledge. So the thing is that architectural design is about making, and that making is in the right side of this taxonomy as performance or procedural knowledge, whereas the left side provides the content. So performance and procedural and knowledge and semantic knowledge are different kind of knowledge representations that we use when we are facing with design problems. And I try to understand how these different types of knowledge are related in design processes. So how does design happens? Well, the notion of design movement was introduced by Donald Schoen in 1983. He says that design activities are a series of experiments and working out what if scenarios, and that constitutes design episodes. Binod Goel also took that notion, and he went beyond and bring the idea of lateral and vertical transformations among those episodes. And in a different field, in cognitive anthropology, Keller and Keller bring the idea of constellation of knowledge representations that interplayed when blacksmiths are dealing with the design and making tools in their practice. So what happened inside of design episodes if we take Jones and Wells definitions? How can we study what is happening inside those episodes, how many sub-episodes, or what is the nature of sub-episodes, if any, within those design episodes? Those are questions that we try to address in our studies. And how do we do that? Well, we bring a bunch of architects to the lab. We give them specific design tasks and record their design processes to run protocol analysis. In this way, you can compare their design processes, and if you can ask each one of them to solve several design problems, you can also compare their own design processes and see what remains constant across their design processes. You can also compare the external representations that they sketch when they are facing design problems, and see if there are similar elements that they use as a pattern, again and again, to solve specific design problems. When I say specific design problems, this is the idea of sub-episode that I showed in the previous image slide. So here is an example of a design episode in action. You can see that this architect was dealing with the site, the circulations around the site, the pedestrian ways, and while he was trying to evoke and understand such circulation patterns, he was drawing those boxes in the right side of the slides with lines and arrows and hatches, matching what he was saying, what he was thinking aloud with the external representations he was drawing. So what we can really see here is an emergent dialogue, an interplay among specific semantic and procedural chunk of knowledge until a design decision is made. Here is another example. This architect started tackling the program rather than the site. He said, so for examples, rooms are bigger than the hall. I am not sure, maybe the hall is bigger, but the theater is bigger than the rooms. So I want to work with those relationships. While he was drawing this kind of bubble diagram in the right side of the slide and connecting future spaces and trying to settle the topology of his design proposal. Interestingly, the conditions of closeness or adjacency of those spaces was not questioned at any time during the design task. But every time that different architects recall these specific units of semantic knowledge, they used it as units of knowledge with the same kind of procedures to build the same kind of external representation of the sub-problem that they were facing, which was a first graphical representation of the program of the building in this case. Thus, I suspect that design procedures are stored as clusters of declarative and procedural knowledge that we use to produce design decisions in this early phase of design formulation. And the content of these clusters is, of course, declarative and procedural. And that is what inform design decisions, but also what allows the what-if experiment that Sean proposed. So in this, another interesting thing that happens when you bring several architects to the lab is that you can compare their design processes, and you can see the graphical toolkit that they use to formulate their design, which is very limited, I have to say. So here is an example of 3 different architects which face 6 different design tasks, and you can see that each graphical element carry different meaning. And that meanings are different units of declarative knowledge, specific semantic knowledge in this case. But the graphical toolkit itself is very limited. Also, you can compare or you will notice how some patterns emerge regarding the issues that architects deal with inside design episodes or sub-episodes. In these examples, we are seeing 6 design processes made by 3 architects solving 2 different design problems. And you can see that the issues that they were dealing with are evoked again and again until they make design decisions with this content. So in this way, we can analyze the occurrence of such design issues, their variety and density, and take a look at architects' declarative stock of knowledge. Interestingly, in our studies so far, you know, room locations, entrance location, room connectivities, architectural elements and materials are the units of knowledge that architects recall again and again, or recall the most, or to do most of their design decisions. So how does design, architectural design happen? Building on top of the idea of design movements proposed by Sean, and of lateral and vertical transformation proposed by Goel, and of constellations of different types of representations proposed by Keller and Keller, I have found that design processes in early architectural design unfolds as a series of design episodes in which architects use declarative knowledge about the site, the program, and the building image and character to navigate from the ill-structured condition of the design problem to a design solution. Thus, we use sub-problems to start the formulation of our designs. We do that by considering site or programmatic issues, some of which are defined as constraints to advance the design process. So far, outcomes of the analysis in our studies also reveal an absence of patterns regarding the association of drafting episodes and these 3 major types of designs episodes that we have found. In other words, high variability seems to drive the way in which participants navigate design processes. Regarding the content inside design episodes, the data that I have collected and the analysis performed reveals that participants divide the design problems into sub-problems, which are more familiar to them, like a set of predefined strategies that allows them to handle non-design sub-problems. In other words, what architects do is to settle on specific sub-problems for which we have developed procedures. And we tackle such issues and features within the sub-problems by redefining them as design constraints, regardless of the nature of the design problem. Before facing a design brief or decide, we know that among the issues that we will have to tackle are the room locations, the room connectivity, the entrance placement, or the side border. So lastly, let me say that in our studies, we observe how architects translated the design task given to them into something they could manipulate on paper. The way in which participants face a design task suggests that they have internalized procedures for tackling such design issues. We suspect that this common set of strategies is nurtured during the design training in architectural school, and by acquiring that training, architects can bring to bear those strategies and design techniques to approach unknown design problems. Thanks for watching. Okay, so thank you everyone for all these presentations. We have some questions. So first, on the YouTube channel, we have Professor David Torreblanca, and he's asking, what is the role of artificial intelligence and neuroarchitecture in the architecture of the future? What do you see about that role? And also, Professor Bernal, I understand that you have a question.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Pretty dense, I can say. There is a lot of content there. I mean, in the final presentation, we have seen a method or an approach to capture design knowledge and design reasoning. In the beginning, Matthias, for example, was showing some methods to reuse existing knowledge, expressed in the form of pictures or pixels or patterns. So one is in the computing side and the other one is in the reasoning side. So right in line with the previous question, what is the contribution, right, of artificial intelligence in design? For me, the fundamental initial question is, there is any difference between thinking and computing? What is the main difference? Because we're assuming some sort of centralized control where we are talking about thinking, if any. And computing seems to be just a collection of local processes, right? That we make sense of what is the product of computing. So for me, it's an open question. I mean, why? Because there is an entire army of people exploring how to implement or take advantage of artificial intelligence in every single field, right? So there is any difference between thinking and computing, if any? Thank you.
Can I jump into maybe answering a little bit of Marcelo's question, but more focused on the role that I think AI and neuroarchitecture plays in the future? I mean, to your point, Marcelo, the difference between computing, I think there's many differences in the two. And however, as we evolve into getting better and better at artificial intelligence and computing generally, I think this gap becomes smaller and smaller. So it's a question of whether or not we want there to be a difference. And I would argue that I still would like there to be a difference, since we bring the reasoning to the computing and have there be a solution to a problem. And we distinguish what kind of results we would like to see, to Matthias's presentation earlier. And in terms of the future, and like I mentioned, I envision this gap becoming smaller and smaller between thinking and computing. But I think what this and the role that all of these presentations play, and especially all the work that's being done in looking at the field of neuroarchitecture and artificial intelligence, is trying to get architecture and design up to speed with the latest technology that we already are using today. And I think there's other fields that are vastly ahead of us in terms of relying on computing and science to drive their designs. And I think architecture is a little behind in the sense that we are still not taking all of these technologies and the power of computing fully into consideration when we're designing these systems. So I envision the future being more integrative of these of neural networks and machine learning and AI, and in a way that doesn't take away from our thinking, but allows us another layer, I guess, again, to Matthias's point earlier, of integration and even development and thinking. So that's kind of my answer.
Thank you so much. Mehdi, would you like to go, please?
Yeah, definitely. So I can see that in two different levels, at the macro level and at the individual level. At the macro level, we are in the world of AC, we are being asked to do a lot more in a shorter time. The schedules are getting shorter. The projects are getting more complicated and complex. And with all these wildfire and hurricanes and things that are happening today, we need to act fast and do things in a fast track order. We need to build cities in 3 months or a year, which used to take 5 to 10 years now. So moving on, everything going to be expedited really fast. And one way that we can do that is by using technologies and techniques such as AI and machine learning. So that's where we are heading in the future. At the individual level, the way that I always see the role of AI and machine learning in design is that, as one of the presenters today mentioned, the things that are energizing us today may not be energetic tomorrow. You enjoy, some aspects of the design or creation today, but you may not enjoy that 2 years from now. And that's your level of energy changes as the time passes by when you're at work. So what are the areas that doesn't give you, it's more tedious, drains your energy, and you can automate that so that you can focus on the area that interests you in your design, and how we might automate those tasks for you as a designer. We often think that these are solutions for everybody. AI is taking over, or this is the end of design, or things like that. But we should think slightly differently, in a sense that how AI can enable us to do the tedious and energy draining tasks so that we can focus on the areas that matters to us and gives us energy. And that's where the collaboration between AI and human happens.
Thank you, Mehdi. I would like to build on top of that, and I was thinking with your presentation as well as with Matthias and Katerina, how the work that all of you are doing is cutting edge, but it's like in different directions somehow, I felt, because one is, of course, in the leading the industry and working with those cases and clients that you show, and the other is cutting edge in academia and research. And I am not really sure if these two, as you said, are getting closer or farther away. Sometimes I feel that the direction is the opposite to closer. And anyway, the other concern that I have, and is also bounded, I think, to this question, is how we can determine what is the stock of knowledge that we need to build to feed these AI systems. Because of course I know, as Marcelo said, that a lot of people is working on this right now, and in 3 years and in 6 years and in 10 years it's going to be a complete different universe. But I don't know if this will take us to a point that we can reach whatever is that point in a bottom up sense, or we need more kind of top-down studies to understand what is the content that we want to put into these systems, or how, at least when I say that, I am thinking how architects make design decisions. Well, I don't know, maybe I am just getting too old. Marcelo, I don't know if you're speaking, I can see you very well.
I don't know if Matthias is around. Okay, maybe not. Yeah, thank you for a pretty comprehensive overview of where we are right now. I've seen how to capture knowledge, how to connect that with human behavior, how to implement that in industry, and how to use that in creative processes. I think it's a very comprehensive picture of the potential. Probably all of us agree that there is a lot of ground to cover yet, right? I had some experience in the area with my colleagues, and oftentimes we dive into in a very interesting paradox. The amount of work we need to do to get fast results from machine learning, artificial intelligence is a lot. Why? Because we still are in the learning curve and still we're in the process of training the system. So we need to produce something that is valid, that is comprehensive enough, that is addressing all the cases. So there's many aspects of the training process that are still under development. And I've been in that area. So in order to get my answer in, I don't know, in 20 minutes, I need to spend like 2 weeks training the system. I can do that manually in half a day, probably. It's an interesting paradox, right? But it looks like we're still in this process of getting there. So thank you for your presentations today. I don't know, Pedro, you have some final words to thank your guests today?
Of course. Yes, I just want to say thank you to the distinguished guests that we have here. The idea was exactly that, as you said, Marcelo, to have a broad view of all these different areas and see if they are getting closer or not. Also, I want to apologize once again for the problems with my connection, even though I tested out that several times this morning, but well, soon happens, they say. So thank you very much, and that's it. Looking forward to the next panel.
Yeah, tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.